Conquer the Noise is a podcast produced by Unconquered, an independent agency challenging brand perspective through redefined content. This podcast is dedicated to telling stories of outstanding ideas and people who have found their way amongst the chatter. I'm Jonathan Hanson, Chief Creative Officer at Unconquered, and I'm your host of Cultivating Purpose and Passion in Business. Today, we're speaking with Rob Koenen, CMO at Box Water is Better. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you making the time.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. This past week, I had the honor of speaking with you just in preparation for our podcast today. And I made the comment when we were speaking that I really wished we were recording the conversations. I thought it was just rich in insight and background and perspective. And going back to that, I'm really going to use that as our theme today and talk through brand values. That was very much what we talked about as far as how we're dealing with the current COVID, the Black Lives Matter movement, and then not to mention just Box Water is Better in itself is a brand statement on values. So, with that, your job there is marketing, making sure everyone knows about Box Water is Better. What are some of the brand values that you're responsible for making sure people know about when talking about Box Water is Better?
No, it is my job. I think on one level, it's the easiest job that I've ever had in my life, in the sense of I've never worked with a company that is so passionate about sustainability and trying to make sure that we're not stripping resources from the planet. So Box Water is, its mission overall is to be an alternative to plastic water bottles or aluminum cans in the on-the-go water market. So instead of making plastic, which comes from oil, or aluminum, which comes from the mineral bauxite and removes minerals from the planet, we're making our water in paper cartons, and paper is clearly a renewable resource. Because you can plant more trees, you can't put oil back into the planet. So that's the high level. That's what our high level mission is, and our values that support that mission have been that we always want to be thoughtful in how we approach things, which means we want to be authentic and we don't want to overpromise. So even in our name, Box Water is Better. At the end of the day, refillable water is the best. I mean, if you have a glass or anything, you should be refilling as often as possible. So we don't claim to be anything more than we are, and we really take pains in making sure that we're being as authentic as possible and not and telling what the truth is. We have blemishes just like anybody else. We just did a life cycle analysis that, in order to do it, we wanted to see where we could get better in comparison to the production of paper cartons versus the production of a plastic bottle, an aluminum can, and or a plastic bottle that's been filled from like islands or imported, like Fiji or Evian or something like that, just to see on the front end what is the impact, not just to mention the recycling, but the amount of energy to blow mold or strip mine, all that carbon dioxide that's put into the world. So long story short, our value is to be thoughtful and always be thinking about ways that make us better. Our other brand value is to be innovative. And our third value is to be pure, to make sure that everything, again, it goes back to being authentic. Innovation is at the core, and we're always looking to what can we do better. And innovation, both from a product standpoint, where we just came out with a new plant-based cap. So our cap has always bugged us. It's made out of plastic, and the plastic was petroplastic. And a lot of companies went to sugarcane plastic, but again, we did our research, and sugarcane is while it's renewable, it's not that good because it's become a for-profit crop, and they're clearing right around the Amazon forest. They're clearing land to make sugarcane fields to make plastic caps. So instead, we went a different direction, which was cool, with our supplier, and we're taking ours from the waste product of trees. So when you cut down a tree, And these trees are all FSC certified, which means that they're grown to and then they're regrown and they're regrown, so they're completely sustainable and self-sustaining. It's not like we're going and cutting down national forests. When you cut down a tree to make paper, there's all these wood chips and all this stuff that is unusable, and so we're using that waste to make a plastic cap. So again, it's crazy when you think about the details, but the details matter in the sense of, so we are trying to be better and use innovations and be thoughtful. To circle back to the larger arc of the conversation, that's been our focus. These last few weeks with COVID and the civil unrest we're seeing, we've spent hours upon hours talking to each other, reflecting upon ourselves, and thinking about what our impact is, not just on a better planet, but in order to enjoy the better planet, how to have a better society or a better culture to make sure that there are people here and there's the freedom to enjoy that planet. And so, yes, so we are actually reevaluating our core on the thoughtful side to think about how can we make sure that while we create a planet that's easy, that is renewable and we're not stripping minerals, at the same time, we're creating a just society where everyone has equal opportunity and equal rights to be able to enjoy this planet that we hope will survive forever. Mm-hmm. Sorry to be long-winded, but it's been an amazing couple weeks as far as trying to think through what is our role in the greater scope of our society.
Yeah, I think that's really well said as far as taking time to start thinking through it in a more serious manner of how we are participating and contributing and even harming our society and our culture and community. But on the note of self-analysis, what was some of the insight you walked away with after doing your life cycle study? Or was that part of what inspired the change in the cap as well?
Yes. Well, definitely. I'm saying because what surprised me more than anything, as we looked at what was determining the biggest effect, and we hired a third-party analysis group that does this for major companies like Ford Motor and Procter & Gamble and whatnot. Mm-hmm. They used ISO certified measurements so that you could measure this against any item that's being made, whether it's how much carbon dioxide is shot up or how much smog is created in the creation of a car versus our box. We can make that comparison now. And what shocked me more than anything internally was that the cap wasn't really the worst thing. The worst thing was really and it's good and bad. Our initial measurement, we have two filling stations. We have one in Michigan and we have another one in Utah. And we had just done our measurement against a Michigan plant, and it came back and said, well, your biggest issue is transportation. And shame on us, when we went back to the third party, we said, well, we have two. And they said, oh, well, that's actually changes everything, because the biggest impact wasn't the cap itself. It was literally the transportation of getting the product there was impacting more than anything. So that was a big aha, and also a kind of a pat on the back. We had already been working on, the reason why I stuttered is we had been working on trying to fix this cap for years because it's always bothered us. So this confirmed the fact that the cap was besides logistics, was the second largest impact item. And so now I'm really happy, because crazy things like the production of oil is bad because you're taking oil out of the ground. But what you don't realize, it's literally has a 1,000% greater impact on ozone depletion than the creation of our box. So creating a one plastic bottle is 1,000% worse, and it doesn't have to do with anything you can think of except for the fact that there is a chemical called halon 133, if memory serves, that they use in the drilling process that cools down and keeps the drills functioning. And that has such a dramatically poisonous effect on our environment that is what makes creating plastic one of the worst things you can do. So these things you would never even think about. When you're drinking a plastic bottle of water, is literally killing. You could do 1,000% better by just reaching 2 inches over and getting a boxed water than getting a plastic bottle. Same thing with aluminum. Aluminum, I mean, these are all just nerdy things, but so aluminum is not a naturally formed material. Bauxite is the actual mineral that it's in. And you have to take bauxite, which is, again, mined primarily in South America, right around our beautiful Amazon rainforest. It's strip mined, which has tremendous effects on our planet. And then in order to separate the aluminum from the bauxite material, it requires over 3% of the Earth's electricity is being used to make aluminum that then becomes aluminum cans or other uses of aluminum. So again, the amount of energy, and all that energy will clearly affects carbon dioxide, ozone depletion, smog, and overall global impact. The worst case scenario, and then I'll stop, because this, and by the way, go to our website. We are full transparency. Like I said, if you go to, we have the life cycle analysis on our website. You have to go to like research and definitions, and it's about 143 pages of nerdy, cool information. If you want to find out what the impact of importing water from either either Nordic Europe, like the Evian water, or Fiji Islands, we looked exactly at what it would take to, every time you pick up a bottle of Fiji, how that's impacting, and it's terrible, because obviously you're transporting water from a South Pacific island thousands of miles in order to get a bottle on your shelf. So there's a lot of extraordinarily cool information that's available. The hardest part in my job is to try to convey this exciting information to a public who has a lot on their plate, not even just right now, but just every day. Before COVID, before all this, people want to do better, but there's so many things distracting you, and there's so many things to do in a day. And yet this is relatively easy. How do I get people to go, oh, I didn't know that. Well, heck, this is easy to choose a carton over plastic. So so on one hand, my job is easy. On the other hand, the job is tough, because there's a lot of, and frankly, there's a lot of other causes. There's a lot of causes, there's a lot of responsibilities. And to try to get people to engage on this level is very difficult.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm hearing is the importance of design, and what you're saying, and design being, whether it's the box itself, the design, the branding, the way the box functions when it's not filled with water, going back to the transportation, and your water filling station. I thought it was really fascinating how the design of the box is made to collapse, so you can fit 6x of truckloads compared to bottled water. How is the design and your thought of this product continuing to evolve outside of the cap, and just like the ability to smash it down and be able to transport more efficiently?
Yeah, no, it's a great call out, because we're not shipping empty boxes that are fully formed, because we're shipping them flat. One of our trucks is the same as shipping 26 trucks of plastic bottles that would be fully formed and generally empty to their filling stations. Well, there's two levels. So there's two levels. There's functional design, and then there's artistic design. And actually, they're both equally as important in anything that you do. So one of the things that I found interesting is that functionally, yes, you can crush ours, you can limit, they take up less space. But the other interesting thing about our design is just we've tried to stay as clean as possible and as aesthetically simple as possible, because again, we think the world is kind of over marketed to. And so we have just said, here's our brand, here's our values, that we're pure and we're thoughtful on the side. This is what we stand for. And what we're finding is that a lot of people are coming to us really because of the purity of the design, as well as they want sustainability. But it's almost like a sustainable luxury. There's a sense of beauty to it. So so companies like DVF and AG Jeans and Rag & Bone, all these fashion companies who go through tons of water, have made the choice to say, you know what, there's beauty in your design, not just the sustainable option of it, and that's important to us. We wouldn't be doing this if sustainability wasn't important. But also the beauty of your box and how clean and simple it is. And so it's really important in this world to think about both emotion and logic, in the sense of logic is the sustainability and all the things you're doing to help the planet by using this. And then the emotion is, I crave that, I want that. So we've got a number of celebrities who we don't pay celebrities. We actually, our profits go to planting trees in our national forests, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But we always say that we don't pay celebrities; trees are our celebrities, and the forests are our celebrities. But at the same time, we have a number of celebrities who are always seen carrying our box, because it is almost like a status symbol. It's almost like eco chic, which I'll take. As a small company without a lot of money, I'll take whatever kind of endorsement I can get. So I think it's important that you constantly create something that functionally works, but equally important is reminding people that it's that you need things that people crave, and that there's an emotional attachment to.
Yeah, you touched on fashion a bit. Your prior work history, you led a lot of fashion brands, and the fashion industry is known for not necessarily being the most eco-friendly between the materials, the dyes, the amount of water that's being used. Some brands in the past, not the ones you specifically have worked for, but have even been in trouble for human rights violations working in small crazy factories. Has your personal mission been tied to this recent role at Boxwater? Is going into the idea of, do you feel like a personal responsibility for the environment or helping clean it up?
Yes. Well, it's funny. I always tell my team, so I'm in my 50s, and I tell my team, or when I give presentations, that I spent the first half of my life kind of mucking up this planet, and I plan to spend the second half of my life helping clean up the planet. I will say that, yeah, I love the fact that the younger generation is so impassioned about environmental issues. We were not even close to that when I was young in the 80s and the 90s. We smoked on planes, and we threw out trash, and so there is a hint of I guess guilt, and that motivates me, and it's a full circle. My daughter is the one who got me involved in all of this, because I was working in the fashion industry and doing great, and I achieved all the goals that I needed to do, and she's the one who started talking to me about the environmental issues. And so again, I think the younger generation is pulling us along, and I know for a fact we're on the forefront, and then there's brands like Patagonia, who's always been on the forefront. But it's fascinating for me as a brand person who studies brands, where I watch how the old rules don't apply for brands anymore. So obviously Boxed Water is focused on a mission of sustainability. It used to be that companies, in order to get you to buy their product, they would do TV commercials with beautiful models or celebrities to say, if you want to live like me, if you want to be like Mike, then use my product. And consumers have become so savvy these days, and the social media has become, and the internet has become such a great tool, that the pretty pictures don't do it anymore. The aspiration to, if I drink your sugary water, I will be somehow prettier or more popular. It falls on deaf ears now. Now it's a time where they're like, okay, I'm going to give you my money. What do you stand for? What are you going to do with my money? And brands now need to reflect the people that work for those brands, and frankly, the consumers who buy for those brands, because it's now become a vote. And consumers are savvy enough to be able to find out what you stand for. And I always say that, Patagonia is the best example of a company who has its, brand values first and foremost, and buy my jacket. But more importantly, it's because I want to help this planet. I make a good jacket, but help the planet, versus, you can name a number of other companies like a Columbia or a North Face or somebody like that who is less likely, not as overt about helping the planet. They make great jackets, but unless companies start turning into more of a, here's what we stand for, consumers are going to migrate to the people who align with their values and align with what they're looking to support. So I kind of went all over that one. But
no, it's interesting because nothing really is linear. It's all tied together. There's all these things linked, and it's not black and white. I think these issues are complicated. And when you get into the idea of buying things, I always consider it like you're voting with your money. The stocks you buy, the products you buy, the vacations you go on. These are all ways of voting and supporting businesses that are either you align with or you don't. And as you've noted, there's been definitely an increase in people's awareness to their impact. So from the brand side, how do you think like your brand messaging and positioning needs to transform and has transformed as the brand grows?
Well, I'll tell you a story that kind of touches also on the question you asked earlier about design and packaging. So we've been around for, Box Water has been in business for 10 years. We were the leader in this category, and about 5 years into it, and this is before my time, but the couple of young people put together this beautiful idea of what can we do better, and they built as you mentioned, a functional box that's very different than plastic, and very clean and aesthetic, and stands out when it's on the shelf compared to all the plastic water bottles. This is white and stark, and they clapped their hands and said, "Job done." And frankly, the company didn't go anywhere. There were a few, leading innovators who bought into it, mostly in coffee shops and whatnot, but it was not growing to scale. So one of the things, and frankly, you're up against Coke and Pepsi, who has $8 billion a year to spend to defend their turf. So what we did as a company is we started thinking about, well, how else can we connect with the community? How else can we find like-minded people? And how else can we help each other? And again, use our platform for good. And what we came up with the help of 1% for the Planet, which we are a 1% for the Planet member, they connected us with another 1% company, the National Forest Foundation, that works with the National Forestry Service to plant trees in our national forests. So I think there's like 19 million acres of forest out there, and 1 million acres go away every year due to pestilence or forest fires. So there's a great need out there to make sure that we keep the forests healthy. Forests are also the main filtration system. Most of the rain in this country filters through either the Rockies or the Appalachians. So our national forests are also a major filtration system for the water that we drink. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we thought about the TOMS model, or if you buy a shoe, you they'll donate a shoe, and we thought, how can we do that better? Because we're not available in enough places for people to buy us. And we decided to use social media, and completely for free, if you take a picture of our box and write #BetterPlanet or tag us at Boxed Water, we'll plant 2 trees in a national forest with the National Forest Foundation. And this was about 5 years ago. And I'm happy to say, one post at a time, we're now up to 1 million trees that have been planted in
Yeah,
the
that's
national,
incredible.
which is insane for a small company out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, to not do this, but actually to be a facilitator for the nation, for this community that we've now built of like-minded people. It's to me, it's very remarkable, and it's exciting because it shows that one person can one small change can make a big impact. The second thing is that it's done is it's gotten a lot of people, like Ellen DeGeneres approached us, and they don't have plastic water bottles on their stage or in their waiting areas. They switched to us not just because of the plastic bottles, but also because they said during all the California wildfires, what can we do to help build, help protect our forests against all the wildfires that are going on. So the point is that there's ways around, there's companies out there that have $8 billion budgets that can do marketing. But if you find a thread that actually helps, that you can make a lot of noise and a big difference and be authentic and create something that's beautiful and a community that's beautiful by just doing something like this. And it doesn't have to be trees. For us, it's trees because it's so close to our home. Mm-hmm. But companies these days should be picking what they feel is important matters to help, and then thinking of creative ways to help change things.
Yep. Plastic water bottles have definitely been a focus of ours. We do a lot of large productions where we have tons of people on set. And I remember early in my career, one of my biggest pet peeves at wrap time was seeing 1,000 water bottles with a sip taken out of it. And it's just sitting there. Then someone gets another one and another one. And suddenly you have just a plethora of waste on set. Yeah. So we started doing, bringing in water coolers and providing canteens. And then just rewashing the canteens as a way to help contribute that. So you're right. I think it does take those like small steps internally that then branch out into like a larger effect. Yeah. And one of the things that you touched on a bit was building community and how you've done that through your Instagram and in your social media. But I would love to hear about the community you've built internally at the company. Right now, I think it's even more important to foster your business community and the people around you and the people that make up your teams, with all of the outside pressure that's happening, with all of the worry and anxiety that's happening, making sure people stay mentally healthy. How have you taken care of the Boxwater team during the last, I would say 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, no, it's been a crazy 5 months for sure. And nobody has been in these uncharted waters before. So it's been amazing. But I'm happy to work for a company that I like to think has its people in mind first and foremost. And this was a great test of that. So the first thing we did as an executive group is we got together and made sure that we protected our cash flow. I'll be quite honest. I mean, we don't want to go out of business, because if you go out of business, then it doesn't help anybody. And our business, we figured a way to cut costs without having to cut people. People are our most important asset. At the same time, our traditional businesses like hotels, universities, corporate headquarters were all closed. Those were all major customers of ours. Mm-hmm. So we were witnessing a time where our salespeople didn't have as much to do. Our production people didn't have as much to do. So instead of laying or furloughing anybody, we said, what can we do during this period to make our team a better team? Better, faster, stronger, smarter. So what we did is we went outside and we actually did sales training on the Zoom, and not just with our salespeople, but the whole team. And it was fun because we did sales training, and at the same time we did sales practice and role playing with each other. So it became something where it was fun because we were pitching each other why boxed water was better. And people from the East Coast were calling the West Coast, production people were calling people. So all of a sudden you have this camaraderie of a team building above and beyond the fact that you're pitching each other. We also did the same thing where we hunkered down and went back through all of our life cycle analysis, all of our sustainability information that we've learned over the last 10 years. And we had little sustainability classes so that we were all up to speed and more knowledgeable about our business. And then the third thing, just to be sharp, I guess you'd say, is we paid for stay-at-home health classes and fitness classes.
Oh,
and
cool.
So we, as a team, we all were posting on our little group chat what we did this morning in order to stay in shape. And we had the rule was you had to do something every day. And so every day you got posts of people exercising with their kids or exercising with their cats. And again, that added an element of humanity to our company, because we got to see people in some awkward, you should see me do yoga, very awkward. So, but very human. So we did things to make sure that our people were energized, that our team was stronger, and then frankly that our team was smarter, because when we come out of this tunnel, we'll be ready to hit the ground. And frankly, it's already paying dividends in the sense that we are sensing that our people are hitting the ground more, and our people are energized and excited. And I think there's a level of family now within the Boxed Water organization that existed before, but is definitely enhanced now.
Are you going to keep these programs going as people start going back to work, going back to the office? Everyone talks about this new normal. I'm not necessarily as convinced of, quote, a new normal, as I think it takes years for culture to change. But I definitely think this is the beginning of what, quote, could be a new normal or a change in our culture. So are you going to keep these things around, or how do you see the culture at Boxed Water evolving over the next few years?
We will definitely keep these around because they were great. I think everybody loved them. I mean, we're still we're still doing the role playing because frankly it's hilarious when you're trying to. So one person pretends like they're a general manager of a hotel, and the other person tries to pitch them, and now it's gotten to a point where you're trying to burn each other, and it's fun. So we're going to keep doing it because it's turned out to be not only beneficial, but it's fun, and it's creating a great community. And so I see that continuing. I think there's going to be a new normal, but what that means may not be as dramatic as what it sounds like, in the sense of. I think back to 9/11, and before 9/11, going to the airport was very different than after 9/11, so that you could call that a new normal, but it didn't really change the underpinnings of a lot of human behavior. So I think there will be some changes, but I think to your point, I think the natural state of human nature is to regress back to the mean, and I think it'll regress to the mean, and there'll be some sort of incremental move forward. So right now, what we're doing is we are slowly returning to the office is open, but it's optional if you want to come back. And we put in, social distancing, cleaning, masks, and things of that nature. We've changed some rules, but I think at the end of the day, and we've also made it optional for now to say, all right, there's going to be 3 of us back. If you feel uncomfortable with that many, then don't come back, and we'll slowly work this out. I think at the end of the day, people will be returning to let's say a 90% normal or a 95% normal at some point.
When we started our agency, we really used values as our foundation for the vision we had for the company, the types of clients we wanted to get, the type of work we wanted to do, how we can give back going forward. And through all of this, it's also become our North Star, and that it helps us stay on track during really difficult times when the house feels like it's burning down and you're kind of panicking. Where do you look to? And I think that was one of our big learning lessons over the last few months, was that these are always going to be there for reflection, analysis, a foundation to help keep things afloat and to keep working towards something. What are some of those values that Box Water has that has helped like inspire, I think, some of these changes that you've been implementing?
Well, let me take a quick commercial break and say that in researching Unconquered, your team and your approach, I am extraordinarily impressed with, and I actually think that you have a great framework for what companies of the future should be.
Thank you.
Regardless of what industry you're in, the Unconquered team and how you've set your values and you've let your values be, let's say, exposed, and how you're choosing to drive your business in a very upright manner, I think is is the way all companies are going to need to be in the next 5, 10, 20 years. So you guys are definitely leaders in that.
Well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. I think there's always a sense of vulnerability when you put everything on the line. And, I encourage just all brands, all entrepreneurs, people who are like trying to start a business, thinking about starting a business, to embrace that vulnerability and like really put it out there. Because as human beings, we all share the same emotions. We all have the same feelings, and vulnerability is one of those things that I think we're often sort of afraid to embrace. But for us, it's been, I think it's pushed our work forward, it's pushed our creativity forward, and it's also made us appear as like human beings. We're not like a big corporate entity, right? We're real, and I think that's going back to some of the ideas that we were talking about earlier about messaging and marketing, really embracing that and putting that in there. And like having an opinion, and really having an opinion and leaning on that. Has that changed in your career as before, like where brands kind of skirted controversy or were maybe less keen on sharing an opinion? Are you seeing now that people are kind of planting a stake in the ground and saying, this is what we believe, this is what we're doing?
Yes, I think the good brands are. I think the older fuddy-duddy brands, it will take them longer to catch up. So I've worked at some major corporations, and I have empathy for them because I was in the C-suite of certain corporations, and information gets so sanitized when it goes through 5, 6, 7 layers to get to you that you start to lose the voice of the consumer, and you think, well, okay, I'm going to write a check to United Way for 3% of our we have a budget for United Way, and my job is done now. I've done as a good corporate citizen, I've done what I needed to do. And frankly, that I'm not taking anything away from United Way. It's a great organization, and people should donate to United Way. But that shouldn't. But that is in the 80s and the 90s. That's where it ended with a lot of corporations, and unfortunately, some corporations that still is their mindset. I would say, though, that the world has shifted completely, and 90% of the companies. I was just on a Zoom call with about 100 different marketeers, and all of them are, from big companies to small, are currently relooking at their social justice platforms, but also are looking at how they impact the environment, how they impact civil justice, and gosh, 20 years ago, that never even was a conversation. I worked at Timberland 20 or 30 years ago, and they were the exception to the rule in the sense of they blended, and that's really where I got my sense of justice. Is their whole promise was doing well while doing good. So do financially well, but also make sure you do good from a social justice standpoint. Everything we did was surrounded by doing something good for the community. Even at our sales meetings, we had a day of volunteerism. As we had a 3-day sales meeting, one of those days was volunteering at something in the local community. So they were the exception, not the rule. I think that mentality has become more of the rule for the majority of companies. And those companies that don't do that, the consumer is going to walk away from them. They will alienate their consumer. And I think it's just literally just a matter of time. It's no different than the adoption curve of anything. I think you've got some laggards who need to come along, but I think that the majority of people now are doing something where a brand stands for the brand needs to, frankly, in order to keep its employees inspired, needs to do something to make sure they're helping the community in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. One of our last conversations, I learned that you're a big history lover. Are you seeing like history repeating itself right now? I think those themes are always really interesting when they reappear, and sometimes we listen to it, sometimes we ignore it, and right now we're going through a whole as we're talking about culture shift, or at least we're stepping back and looking at our current culture. Are you seeing any parallels with history, and are you using that to help guide your as a leader at Boxwater?
Yes, I am. Yes. So actually, I'll nerd out with you for a second. In one of my meetings with our team, I am a history buff, and we can go all the way back to 1865 to talk about how society moves forward and then takes a backslide. It moves forward and back and takes a backslide. But how important it is to have these times in order for us to move forward. So most recently I was inspired by Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ. So LBJ was a Southern senator who became vice president and then became president after John Kennedy was assassinated. He was a renowned racist and a Southern Democrat. And it wasn't until the race riots of 68, meeting JFK, working with Martin Luther King, that he had the epiphany to go, this isn't right. We need to change. And he is the one, after JFK died, who pushed through the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Acts. And they say that if it wasn't for him, these wouldn't have happened, because he was the guy. He'd been 30 years in the Senate. He knew the dirt on everybody in the Senate. And he's calling all his Southern buddies saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to tell the world some of the stuff I know you've done. So he used his political influence and his power to make sure the Civil Rights Act passed. And the point of the whole story is, this guy was like 62, and he was definitely a Southern person, based in 1962. He changed. And so what's cool about the protests that I see going on now and how it relates to what happened in the 60s is that I know that people's minds are changing. And I know that this will make the world, there are things that need to be fixed, and I know that this is going to help fix our country. And you need to have sometimes these issues happen in order to spark and get change to happen. And it happened in the 60s. Frankly, it happened in the 50s. It's happening now. The one thing I will point out that I think is also inspiring to me is that if you go back to if you go back 10, 20 years to Rodney King, the Rodney King incident that I lived through was an incident about police brutality and racism, but it ended there. The conversations we're having now are much different than the conversations we had then. The conversations we're having now is more about, let's say, white privilege and what it's like to live like a black man and woman in America. And I think it's the level and intelligence of the conversations that are getting both African Americans and white people and people of all colors to say, oh, wow, this is an issue. Goes back to being vulnerable and listening to it as a white male and saying, oh, I thought I was doing my part because I don't like to think myself as a racist, but I'm not doing enough because there is still these issues out there. So the intellectual conversations going right now are much better than they were 20 years ago. And frankly, if you go back and look at the films of the 68 riots, I mean, it was brutal. It was terrible. So, and there wasn't the reaction of the people saying, this is brutal, this is terrible. It's more like, yeah, put down the protesters. So I see us moving forward, even though when you look at this moment in time, it seems bleak. It's these moments that actually propel us to the next level.
And we've been really thinking through how we can participate and continue the push forward as a company and individually, whether through it's our policy, our own self-awareness, and our own, I guess, responsibility and everything. As brands go through it, I think there's been just like a huge rush to react and not necessarily take like time to think through implications of what their words mean. What are some of the steps that Box Water has taken on, or I would love to hear if you're comfortable sharing just some of the conversations you're having internally, or how you're making those steps forwards. I think it can, one, offer insight to other people who are in the same boat of wondering, like, what can I do? How can my business change? How can we participate and have it be sustained? The movement's fantastic, but if it lasts 2 months, then there's been a failure somewhere. So how can we keep pushing this forward with our actions?
No, yeah, I'd love to. I'll share and I'll share with the knowledge that what we're doing isn't necessarily right. And I'm sure we start almost every conversation with saying we're going to make mistakes, but that shouldn't impede action around this issue. And everyone's going to make mistakes because we're all human, and humans make mistakes. But it's more about progress and not perfection in this instance. And we have talked about this every day as an organization, either within pockets or as a group. And the first thing, and it's actually just to your point, as you sit down and talk to the company, like any group, any community, you've got people who are saying exactly that. Let's act now. What are we going to do? Let's do something. And then you've got another side saying, well, we're a company, we're a business, we're about the environment. This doesn't have to do anything with us. So it's a starting point of us coming together as a community, even within our group, to talk through, well, what does this mean? And what is our role within it? And my gosh, it's a very emotional conversation to have in a business. And in a lot of cases, people are saying, and it's right, there is what you believe as a person, which should influence what our brand believes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what you believe is also what the brand believes. Does that make sense? It overlap, but it doesn't necessarily have to be 100% an overlap. Because there are people who want to give money right away. And so I kind of put the brakes on and said, we are not knowledgeable enough to be able to understand, if we were to write a check, where to write a check. And frankly, if writing a check is the right thing to do. And then third, if it's the right thing to do for a company our size. I mean, our check would be 1% of what a Starbucks check would be. So, Starbucks can give $100 million. We can't. So maybe there's other ways for us. Again, it goes back to being thoughtful. So the steps we're taking is step one, and it's been weeks of listen, learn. We've got kind of an open funnel for people across our whole organization to send us information, and we're dispersing it on the voices. And it's kind of under the headline, diversify your feed. One of the key things that we're learning is and I'm a great example. I'm a human. My feed on Instagram, Facebook, and so on is very one-dimensional. And so I am opening up to more voices and listening to more people so I can understand what's going on and have empathy for different people within the country. So it's diversifying your feed. That goes to a lot of articles and a lot of YouTube. Oprah Winfrey just did a phenomenal Super Soul conversation with 8 Black leaders across the country that we've dispersed within the company so that everybody can start learning together. So step one is learning. And then step 2 will be acting. And acting is going to be multiple layers. We're still in the process of rewriting our social justice platform and how it fits into our values. But I can say already what we know we can do. is we have been promoting customers of ours who are owned or Black-owned companies, to encourage people to go to these, because we all know that everyone's hurting, and black companies are hurting more than others. So we're trying to do that, and in our feed, we're also trying to share voices, diverse voices, with our customer and with our consumers, so that they can learn along with us, and also so they can see what we're doing as a company. And then the final step will be to measure. So we know we're going to be doing training. We know we're sharing information, but then the next step is going to be putting together an execution plan of how often and how do we measure against this. And I'll be honest, we haven't gotten to that yet. We're still in this middle phase of saying, okay, what is the most appropriate action? I mean, one of the things I want to do, because again, it's not about money, is I think it's a good idea to say, all right, education is one of the roots of the issue here. How can I, as an individual, help more underprivileged people get a better education? Can I, and will Box Water give me, an hour a week or 4 hours every 2 weeks to donate my time to the underprivileged? That's something, to me, that a company could do without writing a check, and probably has more of a long-term impact than just writing a check.
Yeah, sometimes I think.
I don't know if that helps. Again, it's there.
Yeah.
And we're talking to a lot of people and having these conversations, saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What's working for you?" Because there is no right or wrong, and you just have to do what you feel is best. I mean, we had this conversation last week, and you guys shared a lot of good insights, because again, we're a little company in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We have people across the country, but I need to know what are you guys doing in New York? What are people doing in California?
Yeah, and I think financial contributions are really helpful, but I also think it's just a really easy way to get by and say you did something. Real change starts inside with a human being, and personal analysis and change is super difficult. It's not, there's a lot of, like we're saying, talking about vulnerability. There's a lot of emotions involved in that, and owning that can be hard, I think. And I think what we're ultimately talking about as well, and going back, tying this into our conversation earlier on brand values, is sustainability, and how sustainability isn't just an environmental thing. It goes deeper than that. It can be sustaining cultural change, the sustainability of supporting your employees while running a business, and going back, and sustainability of the environment. I think one of the ways that we've been trying to make a change is by looking and analyzing our hiring practices, our time of which we can give back, and also just thinking through, like, what small things can we do to make the bigger changes. I think it all starts with those, like, small incremental steps. So
and
I'm curious.
It starts with the awareness of, let's recognize that there is a problem, and then also dig deeper as to what that problem is. Because I think one of the biggest learnings we've had as an organization, or at least, like, I'll speak personally, that I've had, is that just the recognition of how deep the problem goes, and having the empathy for what it's like to live as a Black person in this country, was something that I never really thought of in a deep manner, and that's a starting point to say, yeah, I do have a role in trying to help this in some way, and that, to me, is like the big focal point of the last 3 weeks. From my personal experiences ago, I thought just being a good guy and it was the way to go, because I am fair in all my practices, but realizing that that's not enough. We have to go deeper, and I think that's the biggest change in these conversations. Is it's not enough that just you do a good job, but you also have to make sure that the community is being supportive equally to all the groups.
I think you really touched on it with I love the comment you made earlier about progress over perfection. You know, I can be a perfectionist. You know, I will fuss over really small details, and sometimes I think that can actually hold back the actual evolution of the project we're working on, or you know, of the time I'm spending maybe not be as important to spend on that tiny little detail versus like just getting this whole thing rolling down the hill. As we wrap up here, any advice to young entrepreneurs, and I hate to preface with young, but just entrepreneurs in general, on progress?
I'm an old entrepreneur.
Exactly. Entrepreneur does not discriminate with age. So, so is there any advice you'd give?
Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was in his 60s.
You're kidding me. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, he was again, I mean, that's why it's never too late. He was a failed restaurateur, and he didn't start Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was in his early 60s. Yeah.
Well, failed in quotes, because I think he redeemed himself there.
I think it turned out okay. Exactly. Yeah. So yes, young and old entrepreneurs. I guess the piece of advice that's keeping us together as a North Star, because is if you had a good idea before COVID-19, before all this other stuff, stick with your guns and keep that idea. And yes, you might be having, it might be taking a back seat right now, but that doesn't mean it's not a good idea. And figure out ways to stay afloat, which is easy to say but hard to do. But don't change what you're doing if you had a great idea in the beginning, and it's easy to do that. But us, for example, you know, clearly environmentalism has taken kind of a back seat for a number of things, like COVID-19. People are buying plastic water just because they need water, right? And they used to be sustainable, but now, you know, I just need a couple cases of water because I'm working from home. That doesn't mean that it's still not important to make sure that we are sustainable as a community, and that doesn't mean that when we come out of this tunnel, people will go back to say, yeah, sustainability matters. So if you've got a great idea and you have something that's differentiated from money, and you have a community, even if that community is distracted for now, stay with it and stick with your values, because you will come out stronger than ever. That's the biggest piece of advice I think I have, is don't despair, just because at this moment it seems like it's it seems like things aren't working. Things will rebound, and they'll rebound quickly. And again, if you had a good idea then, it's still a valid idea now.
Yeah, but the good ideas are always relevant regardless, right? Yeah.
So. And we had a lot of people despairing because you saw plastic sales increasing, and our sales, the sustainable category was shrinking a little bit because it came down to price. People wanted to buy cheap Nestle water, and that's going to happen. But as long as we're moving the bigger picture forward, then we will be okay. And when the country reopens, people will be supporting sustainability again.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation. Offline, I hope we get to continue it. And where can people find you or your water if they want to order some? Is it on your website?
Go to our website. Like I said, boxedwaterisbetter.com. Learn more about our company, learn more about the National Forests, and you can buy there, and you can buy on Amazon. And we're at different stores. We're at a bunch of CVSs across the country, but the easiest thing to do is have it delivered right to your door.
All right, Rob. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been great.
Thank you so much for joining us today and listening on our conversation with Rob. Personally, I think having a conversation around brand values and even personal values is really beneficial, especially right now as our country deals with COVID and the evolution of equality. These things can really serve as our North Star and help keep us focused when there's a lot of other distractions and things calling our attention. And frankly, there are times when we frankly just don't know what to do. So if there's anything that you want to hear, any suggestions or business leaders that you want to hear from, please let us know. You can email us at hi@weareunconquered.co. And we would love to continue the conversation. So we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.